that one. Somebody said it's the snap of a finger. Right? Remember always you can cut and paste into that text box too. That works perfectly fine. Okay. I do tell students this for the most part. I know that you guys are Apple savvy and stuff. I would suggest to you, if you are unfamiliar with PCs and you are getting a job in the business world or the healthcare industry or the government, familiarize yourself with PCs. It really is not that much different than Apple, but it is a benefit to you. And I'll tell you right now, you think it's not that big of a deal, but if you put on your CV that you're an expert at Excel or Microsoft Word or Outlook or any of these Apple apps or anything like that, that actually helps your career. Like on my CV, it lists my statistical analysis and my skills, and that is something that translates to anything. I can go work for a scientific company right now. And academic people don't like to think about this, but if you go work for a private company and you have technical skills, computer skills, you are probably going to make twice as much money as somebody else. And the unemployment line is not going to exist for you. I mean, it's serious. If you can do route servers and all that other stuff, anyway. So there's my little thing about technology. So at least you've learned, hopefully, this Blackboard skill. I would say, though, I understand some of the issues because PeopleSoft is a monopoly, essentially. So they're the only ones that run these Blackboard software. So that's one of the reasons why there's so many glitches in it. I'm sure you've noticed it. Like it'll come up and it'll say fail to import or something dumb like that. Or if you click on some place where you're supposed to type, it won't even let you type. It's kind of silly like that. Anyway, just like Internet Explorer. Anyway, all right, so today what I'm going to do is we'll have a bit of an oral quiz today. I'm pretty satisfied that people are reading. If you're not reading it, you really should, because I think you should enjoy some of these writings. I do want to say that I hope that nobody took the lecture last time the wrong way. I was not trying to insult anybody's individual beliefs or Christianity. I just wanted to give you the devil's advocate or a different perspective of what, if you knew nothing about religion, not just Christianity, what would you think if somebody explained it to you, the way things take place? Or outside of mainstream religions, if you give alcohol to 9-year-old kids, you are going to be in trouble. Seriously. You know, that was one of the things they accused Michael Jackson of, among other things. But again, inside of a church, it's perfectly fine because it's normalized that way. And in reality, you're not getting anybody drunk. And what you are doing is you are reinitiating a long-standing tradition, and you're connecting to your family and your ancestry and your history and all this other stuff. So I understand that part. But if you look at it, I would say one dangerous aspect of the wine as communion ritual. Can anybody tell me what the issue is? Some people are genetically predisposed to this. What's the problem if you give people taste of alcohol? Right, and unfortunately, people who are of Celtic descent have a high level of this genetic predisposition for alcoholism. They also tend to be Catholic. Now, Catholics aren't the only ones that take communion, so if you're Baptist, you're still going to do it. But unfortunately, we don't know what could be happening. Okay? But again, I hope that I made it clear that I was not singling out any one religion or activity. So I just want to be sure about that. But I was trying to make the point of this element of the social construction of what is a religion versus a cult and the ramifications of those definitions, where these things come from. Now, Chapter 4 and Chapter 5 were about, so what was Chapter 4 about? And this is the series of articles that they talked about in the Waco Tribune Herald called The Sinful Messiah. What was Chapter 4 about? Yes?
Claim makers and their accusations against cult members.
Okay, so can anybody give me an example of a claims maker? Whether at this Waco or any other, like for example, are there claims makers that draw attention to drunk driving? Somebody name me an organization who does this. Right? And believe it or not, what's SAD stand for again? Students. Believe it or not, they have one called RAD, Rockers Against Drunk Driving, and I think there's another one called like Rock Stars Against Drugs and stuff. And it's like, and Motley, one of the Coreys, you know, Corey Feldman and Haim, I think it's Feldman. Which one is dead? Haim killed himself. Feldman, they interviewed him, and he said that they used to do rock against drug commercials or things like at a fair, and then go in the parking lot and start doing lines and smoking weed. And Motley Crue said the same thing. If they needed money for dope, they would go do these commercials. It reminds me of the prom promise. Did anyone have this at the prom? I knew students who would sign the prom promise on purpose and didn't get wasted. You know, and so nowadays it'd probably be on YouTube or something like that. So it's probably not a good idea to show yourself underage drinking on YouTube. Some woman just got fired recently for not giving her Facebook password. She was a teacher. I would assume they were. That's an iffy legal area in my opinion. I have no doubt she's going to sue the school and probably win. You can't take someone's email unless it's a professional email account. Like the school could look at my email account with LIU. They can't look at my Progressive Yahoo account unless they subpoenaed it. So anyway, so these claims makers, what kind of activities do they engage in? So give me an example of a claims maker in chapter 4, and what kinds of things do they do? Oops. Because before there's a problem, like, has there always been attention paid to drunk driving or drug abuse or child abuse or kidnapping or domestic violence? Right? You guys don't know this, but the current attention paid to domestic violence, does anybody know? It was a very famous trial that drew attention to this. Anybody know what it is? Anybody? What was one of the most famous trials ever? In the 1990s.
OJ?
It came out that OJ had repeatedly battered his wife, the one he killed. They tried to use that as that he was guilty. Now the jury didn't buy it, but it created a national conversation about what is going on here. If you remember when Elliot Spitzer got caught, that created kind of a conversation about escorts and about infidelity and all kinds of stuff. So sometimes subjects are brought up by the behavior of others, like when Tiger Woods did what he did, and things like that. So sometimes things get attention in and of themselves. But let's take an issue like a cult in Waco. If you are, first of all, who would you be that would be upset that there's a cult in Waco? And what would your relationship be, if anything, to those people? And what types of things, who would you talk to, and what types of things would you try to get out to the public? There's two major institutions you would want to tell immediately.
An example would be like if the cult, I guess, persuades like your child to get involved, the parents are going to...
So family members of people who are in the cult, who not necessarily were in the cult themselves, but now their kids are in it. That certainly was the case with Jonestown. So your kid's in a cult, who are you going to go tell?
They usually use the media as an outlet.
That's a big one. Now at first, do you remember, did the media care about this that much?
No.
It didn't. Even though they were making what kind of does everybody remember what kind of accusations were being leveled at the group by former members and family members of current members? This is important because if you're going to define a group as dangerous, you have to make them out to be a threat, right? So what types of actions are threatening to children and to the public at large? Specifically, what kinds of things were the group accused of? No. That's a good guess, though.
Child abuse.
Child abuse was the #1 issue, even though the ATF has no jurisdiction whatsoever over child abuse. They made that centrally one of their major issues, and they have been roundly criticized by people who posit an alternative view of what happened at Waco, that it was sex abuse and physical child abuse. They said, in chapter 6 you'll read, they told Janet Reno that 8-month-old babies were being beaten till they were bloody with wooden spoons. Now, if you are the head of the Department of Justice Department, or you're an FBI official, or you're a local sheriff, and that gets out into the media, can you just stand there and do nothing? What at the very minimum do you need to do if that stuff gets out into the media? Huh?
Investigate.
At the very minimum. And you'll see later on in another documentary I'm going to show you that they actually did that. They did it repeatedly. One of the other things they were, Vernon Howes, or David Koresh, whatever name you want to use it for him, was accused of was statutory rape. It says right here, this is the Sinful Messiah 6-part piece that the Waco Tribune Herald did. It says, and here's the first 3 sentences. If you are a Branch Davidian, Christ lives on a threadbare piece of land 10 miles east of here called Mount Carmel. They are not trying to be friends with this guy. And you remember the media loves to, if something is sort of a threat, they make it into a massive threat. Right? Like the swine flu. They made that out to be that was going to be the end of the world, didn't they? Like if you didn't get a swine flu shot, you were good as dead. You might as well just go buy a coffin. And again, I think I mentioned this. The regular flu kills over 200,000 people in this year in this country alone. Okay, and stuff like that. So anyway, so there's an attempt to take facts, selectively present them, and present them in the worst light as possible. And if there's rumors and innuendo, even better. And we call this a tabloidization of the media. And it comes across in TV shows, regular news programs, and shows like TMZ and E! Entertainment Television. Have you ever seen The Daily Soup? And stuff like that, right? Or on the internet, right? If I pulled up Yahoo's website right now, I guarantee you there'd be some story about somebody getting killed. I just saw a story. They had a story of a toddler drowning in a washing machine. That's exactly the type of story the news media loves. You know, they salivate over stuff like that. And I think it's unfortunate, and the news media has been accused of this, that they deal in blood. They exploit the death and harm and pain of others. There was a school shooting in Michigan recently, California recently. Right. And I don't think they really cared about digging underneath what really was going on, or they tried to, and they made this guy out to be some loony, which he probably was, you know, probably at least imbalanced, that had all these financial difficulties. The news media loves to fit like a pop culture theory into why people do things. And it's much more complicated. I know a lot of people have money problems and are a little imbalanced emotionally. They don't go out and shoot 7 people. Just like at Virginia Tech. I know a lot of people on antipsychotic medication. Maybe not a lot. But I know some people on antipsychotic medication, they don't go around stalking and shooting 33 people. You know, so there's way more factors going on. The news media is not interested in digging into the details as much. They just want to go, here's a villain, here's the victims, here's the heroes. Like, you remember that Fort Hood shooting? With the psychiatrist who went berserk and started shooting people, and they had the security guards took him down, and they turned these people into heroes. And at first they thought the woman was the one who shot it, or something like that. They had the wrong security guard. They gave this person like accolades when they really didn't. Weren't the ones who shot the other person. But let me read the rest of this here. You'll see this here, how they're constructing this. He has dimples. I don't know why they put that in there. Claims a 9th grade education. So what are they trying to suggest there? Dumb. Some kind of idiot. Obviously, not somebody you should... And also, that if you got an 8th grade or 9th grade education, you're not qualified to be the head of a religious group. I mean, some people would suggest if all you have is 9th grade education, you're barely literate. You know, I mean, seriously. Well, I mean, think about what you learn. I mean, it's not the case, but what they're trying to suggest is that here's a moron who doesn't understand it, or just a dumbass. It doesn't understand anything. And also, what does that suggest about the rest of the group? Are they smart? No. Why would you listen to somebody with a 13-year-old education, or like education of a 13-year-old? You know, 13-year-olds always make the right decision, right? Always. Should like one of them president. Maybe get something done with the budget deficit if we had a 13-year-old. Anyway, it's like the Emperor's New Clothes. It was a kid that said the Emperor was naked. You know. I'll tell you right now, if you talk to 8-year-olds about the national debt, they'd be like, "This is the dumbest thing I've ever seen." I mean, to somebody who's it's like the thing when you look at, you pull away, you look at something. If you sat down and said, "Okay, the government spends $1.3 trillion more than it takes in, and it has no desire to change," that's not sustainable. Like even a 9-year-old would understand that. So, and 9-year-olds are quite smart. So maybe this is not. They're trying to insult him. Here's worse. So that's just an insult. Married his legal wife when she was 14. What's that? What's that an accusation of? Yeah, that's a crime. Now he's a criminal. And I love how they said his legal wife. They're trying to suggest that obviously he has what? Yeah. And how can this is what I would say to them. Now, I know this is kind of strange. First of all, in this, up until probably the 19th, I think I told you this, guys, before. I told the class this before. Even up until 1890, do you guys know what the age of consent was in New York? 12 years old? Because people drop dead at 35. You know, look, in the 1890s, especially if you lived in a tenement, you were lucky to make it to age 5. New York at one point made Calcutta look like a nice place. It was the dirtiest, filthiest, most disease-ridden, cramped, overcrowded city. Anybody ever been to the tenement museum? Go there if you get a chance. If you've ever heard, anybody ever read Jacob Riis's book, How the Other Half Lived, where he took pictures of this stuff? New York was nasty. There were no sewers, and there was no running water, so you had a bucket, and you threw it out the window. Okay, seriously. It's actually one of the reasons why, this goes back to Roman times, why men are supposed to walk on the sidewalk and women are supposed to walk here, because when the crap comes out the window, it's going to hit the man. So, I'm serious, look it up. So, you gotta look up the origins of the F word. That's a hilarious story. It actually it's an anagram that means fornication under the consent of the king. They were trying to repopulate Europe after the Black Plague. Anyway. So now they're accusing him of crime. Enjoys a beer now and then. So now they're sort of suggesting that a good Christian wouldn't drink it. Most Christians I know drink beer. Not a big deal. They drink beer with wine, you know. Some of them, they'd rather have beer for the communion thing than wine. Some people don't like red wine. Anyway, it just doesn't work. It's not the right color. Anyway, and on St. Patrick's Day, look how people celebrate. They drink green beer then. And by the way, I think I mentioned this. People in Ireland don't do that. It's actually not that big of a deal, that holiday there. It's really not. Huh?
Was he Italian?
No, he's actually Welsh. He was actually Welsh. So, and he didn't, there were no snakes in Ireland anyway, so I don't know where that story came from. He actually helped to spread Christianity to Ireland. That was the point. And I don't think he was an alcoholic, but people take it as like, let's do the parade, and then later on we can vomit some green things up later. Plays a mean guitar, so now he's a musician. Maybe that's a little dangerous. Here we go again with the accusations. Reportedly packs a 9mm Glock, which means, when you say somebody's packing a gun, does that mean they just have it and they're locked up in their safe somewhere, or are they carrying it around like Plaxico Burress? Right? Or Gilbert Arenas. Pick a gun. I'd be like, I don't think. Poor guy. And there's an example, when you get a reputation, it's hard to back that off, because still right now nobody wants to touch Gilbert Arenas. So like, don't bring guns to the locker room. And he was partly serious, I think, that they were going to have like some kind of duel like Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton or something. So, but is there anything in Texas, is there anything really that abnormal about carrying a gun? Not at all. I mean, in Arizona, you can get a permit to carry a concealed weapon. When I was a kid and I visited my dad in Arizona, they changed this law now. You could strap a gun to your hip and walk into a bank, into a school, into a grocery store. I'm not kidding. My dad thinks he's John Wayne or Clint Eastwood or something, and Crocodile Dundee at the same time. And a lot of the people in Arizona are sort of like that. It's the Old West. It's like Tombstone. They pull up their belt with the guns hanging off of it. It's not like, and it doesn't seem like, oh my God, look at this lunatic carrying around guns. And Texas has a similar feel to it. Most of the Southwest, in the South, New Orleans has a very high gun ownership rate. Unfortunately, that's a very high murder rate. Anyway, and then further, so here, potentially violent, maybe, right? But here's worse. And keeps an arsenal of military assault rifles. Now that probably is not normal, right? Most people don't have AK-47s, and if they do, they don't show them off, and they don't. If they do have one, they don't have 40 of them, like he had. So they're trying to suggest that he's got an issue with weaponry, and also here, now they're lastly trying to discredit him, and willingly admits that he's a sinner without equal. They're trying to say David Koresh is now his legal name. Why would you say something like that? Who cares if he changed his name? Ron Artest changed his name. Maybe he didn't want, because Meta World Peace did not start a riot in Detroit. And technically that was really, was it Jermaine O'Neal? Didn't he the one that jumped up into, or one of them, jumped into the stands and punched the wrong person? That's just a lesson. Don't throw beer at a basketball game, especially in Detroit. You know. Anyway, so what's the big deal with him changing his name? So what? Potentially, right? Or in my other class, people said he's delusional. right? And you'll find out why he took David Koresh as his name when I show you this documentary. I'll tell you the David part. He took that because of the name of King David. Which when you go around walking around saying you're King David, that's a little bit delusional. You know? It's one of the reasons why, although Hispanics will do this, they'll name their kids Jesus. When do you ever see a Protestant or a Catholic person like that's not from Latin America that names their kid Jesus? I have relatives named Moses and stuff like that. There's sort of this reverence. Like Hispanic people do it because they want to honor Jesus. Most Americans don't think that they don't want to name their kids that way, although some of them do.
We were talking about that my church the other day. The only big problem with that is because in Hebrew it's Yeshua.
Right.
So it's like it's Joshua, just in Greek it's Jesus.
That's
so
true. And in Hindu they call Jesus Esau.
Yeah,
So yeah. I think I've even in one language, Aramaic, his name's Jesu. So yeah, so you're right to some extent. So there's a lot of people named Joseph and things like that. So, but in general, you don't meet people that are American Catholics, or unless they're Hispanic, that are named Jesus. It sounds odd. Even though Moses and Abraham, one of our presidents, was named over. Anyway, so they're trying to suggest that because he changed his name, that there's something wrong with him. You notice here, look at this word here. You see the word cult and law enforcement officials. So trying to suggest he's under investigation. They mentioned that he's 33. Why do you think they mentioned he was 33? Right, and he claims to be. The other issue is, and I think he says it in here somewhere, he claims to be a Messiah. That's what he said. And then here's the source of their information. Former Branch Davidian. What's the problem with like somebody from a former member of the Bush administration writing a book about the Bush administration? If they got fired, what's the problem? Should you believe what they say? Or at least not everything, right? It doesn't mean they're lying. But it certainly means you got to take a close look at what they're saying. And believe it or not, that actually happened. Scott McClellan, who was Bush's chief of staff or something like that, he wrote a book that tore George Bush to pieces. Said, look, this guy he didn't listen to his advisors. He was obsessed with Iraq when he first came into office. And it's similar to what Bob Woodward said. But anyway, that's a problem if you have somebody who has a vendetta against you. And Mark Barreau, his wife was still in the group, and so was his daughter. And his wife was quote unquote, in his mind, forced to have sex with David Koresh. One of the rules of David Koresh's thing, his group, was that only he could have sex. Everybody else had to give their wives to him, so he could father what would become the blessed elders of the earth after Armageddon happened. You starting to see why the government and the media was concerned? And there's the other element, right? The media is the one institution you want to tell, but can the media really do that much about it? No. What you want is a double effect. You want to tell the government and the media at the same time, and you want the media to tell the public, and you want the public to pressure the government. It's sort of a circular thing here that are reinforcing. It's what they call the Deviance amplification spiral. That okay, this comes out. And then the public gets mad, and they demand more information from the media, and they also demand action from the government, and the government gets this report, and they don't want to look like they're not doing anything. And in democracy, you do not want to look like you're sitting on your hands when there's a bunch of perverts down the street taking advantage of kids. You will lose office very quickly, and in a lot of places in this country, sheriff is an elected office. Is there a problem having a law enforcement official as an elected office? What can be some of the issues if you have a sheriff that's up for re-election every 3 to 4 years? To some extent, or on top of it, maybe he or she is more gung-ho because they know, look, when they run for re-election in 3 or 4 years, they got to say, look, this is what we did. And if you did nothing, you're leaving office. And it tends to make people a little more extreme, and they're impacted by money. Also, you might get somebody who's not even trained in criminal justice that wins the office. There's no requirement to have, I'm pretty sure right now, maybe some of you can tell me, to be a police officer, I'm not even sure you need to have college education. Is it an associate's essentially or something? They certainly don't make you take like constitutional law classes. That's not a requirement and things like that. So, but anyway, they do make you go through a battery of tests.
What rank you're applying?
Well, just regular officer.
To begin with the associates, but as you have to
So to be a captain or a detective.
And to get high.
Yeah, if you want to be a detective, you better have a degree in forensic science or something. Something. And you better have taken a constitutional law class too. So anyway. So here are the Waco Tribune did an 8-month study and came out with these 6 parts. The ATF actually found out that they were doing this study. They took some of their information, and they also told the Waco Tribune Herald to not print this until they did the raid on the compound because they didn't want to tip Koresh off. But they published it the day before the raid. And Koresh knew about the raid, and it turned into an absolute disaster. I showed you a little bit of the information. We're going to watch this documentary today, and then we're going to rehash some of what happened during the raid itself. But here are 20 other cult members and a review of court records. There have been several court cases because of this. The first media coverage done was a current affair episode done in Australia, of all places. And one of the reasons why is because many of the members were from Australia and New Zealand. In Australia, you guys know this about British tabloids. Australian and British tabloids make our tabloids look tame. You saw this stuff with the News of the World. They hacked a dead person's voicemails on their phone. They paid police off to tell them when celebrities got arrested. I mean, that is outrageous behavior. They show nudity all over these tabloid magazines. You read the National Enquirer, you might get a story about Elliot Spitzer being probed by aliens or something. You might get something weird like that, or Hitler's still alive in Argentina, but you do not get the type of gross, disgusting detail or invasion of people's privacy that you see in Australia and in England, although we're getting to that point. But here are the accusations that were made about the group by former members and by government officials. One, that children were abused physically and psychologically. That Koresh boasted of having sex with underage girls in the cult. And again, one of the interesting things, and that should tell you, claims makers make use of, and the media is a claims maker too, they make use of language, in particular language that drives people's images in their head or their emotions. And one of the most probably one of the nastiest, most vilifying things that you can call a religious group is a cult. Because once you do that, I don't know anyone, and there could be people, and if you feel this way differently, unless you don't know what a cult is, I don't think there's any positive way to look at a cult, is there? Nobody goes, you know what, I joined a great cult the other day. I'm so happy that we get to go to our cult meeting tonight. And Debbie Layton, in the Seductive Poison book she wrote that I referenced in my article, she said nobody joins a cult. You join a community group, you join a religious group, you join a spiritual thing, you join a movement, a social movement, and it slowly turns into some kind of bizarre reality. She was in Jonestown with Jim Jones. And also, there's mythologies that people who join cults are just complete idiots, or sheep. And they're dumb, they're weak, they're vulnerable. That's not the case. The people in this group, one of them, Wayne Martin, was a graduate of Harvard Law School. He was the first editor of the Harvard Law Review, the first black editor. Guess who the second black editor of the Harvard Law Review was? Yeah. So we're not talking about some moron who would just listen to somebody. This also shows you how important religion is in many people's lives. And Wayne Martin was willing to live in this compound even though he could have made hundreds of thousands of dollars a year as a lawyer. When you get a degree from Harvard, people step over their grandmothers to hire you and stuff. I mean, it really is bizarre. And I love it. Does anybody know what language they write their degrees in? And if you don't know Latin, you can't even read your own degree. Yale does that too. I don't know if Princeton does. I think all the Ivy League schools do that. Maybe I'd like to see if Cornell does that. Poor Cornell. Cornell and Brown get made fun of constantly. It's like, I'd go there in a minute. What are you talking about? Anyway. And it has had at least 15 so-called wives. Okay? And it says here, authorities, and here's the thing. Because when you're in the news business, you got to create controversy or something. Tension. It's that idea of the tragedy of dramatic tension. That in order to create dramatic tension, you have to put people in harm, or at least create harm, or elements of harm. Authorities have not acted on the complaints. That is probably the most significant statement in this news piece, isn't it? Because what this says is, hey sheriff, hey FBI, hey ATF, hey local authorities, you've done nothing. There's a sicko pervert living right down the street molesting people and with guns bristling everywhere, and you haven't done a thing. Now, they did investigate it, supposedly. Some officials said former cult members making allegations have not appeared in person to swear out a complaint against Howe, and they're saying that as that, look, there's a technicality that the authorities can't do anything until somebody swears a complaint, and that's just a technicality on some levels, all right? Look, rumor, if your next door neighbors are rumored to have a crack house going, the police do not wait until you file a complaint in court. They go get a search warrant based on probable cause, and they go and they kick the door in at 7 o'clock in the morning, and they drag people out. And it appears on cops. And this is something that some police officers that are real gung-ho, like SWAT team, they'll run their mouth like and they'll beat people up too. Like, you scumbag, crack dealer, bam, and push you down like on the table. And it's like, dude, you just violated someone's rights there, and if they aren't a crack dealer, you are really in trouble. You know, for the most part, this innocent before proven guilty stuff only exists in the courtroom. Think about it. The media makes people guilty. A lot of police officers assume look, if I find crack in your car, you're guilty. I don't need a judge. I need a jury. That's why they think if you refuse for them to search your car, they think automatically you have something in it. That's why they'll call for the dog. Like, we'll run the dog over. So, anyway, or they'll just tow your car. That's also a trick if they're going to try to breathalyze you. Tell them you want a blood test because then they have to take you downtown. Hopefully you sober up by then. They used to do that. I don't think they do that now. Anyway, so it says, though they have mailed sworn statements to local, state, and federal authorities, other officials said they needed evidence, not allegations. Former cult members in Australia pulled their money and hired a private detective, Jeffrey Hossack, to lodge their complaints with authorities. Hossack said he believes authorities will act only if someone is killed. So they're saying, look, local authorities, you have a chance to stop this guy from abusing any more people, and if you don't stop him, what's going to happen? And then you're going to come clean the mess. And that's something I think a lot of the public does understand, but really can't do anything about. Can police stop murders for the most part? No, they come in and they clean the mess up and take pictures, and eventually, hopefully, they arrest the person. It reminds me of Minority Report, if you've ever seen this movie. It was actually a Philip K. Dick book where they developed this technology to see through people's minds, and they could tell when the government could arrest people before people committed crimes. And if you think about it, that's the only way you'd be able to prevent murder. But here's the problem. Just because somebody's thinking about a crime, does that mean that they're going to commit it? I would bet you that all 308 million people in this country have thought about committing some kind of crime, even if it's just shoplifting candy. You know? Even if it's just a passing thing, like, hey, I could rob a bank. Nah, not a good idea. Let's download illegal music and sell, stuff like that. Most people, will scratch across that, but it usually goes away very quickly. Just like I'm sure there's at some point that you've gotten angry enough at somebody where it's like, man, I could push that person down the stairs right now. But that's as quick as it comes, it's like gone, right? For most people. If you start obsessing about it, then you need probably some psychiatric help. So, like obsessions of morbidity are a sign of serious psychological issues. So, anyway, all right. So let's back up. So let's watch this documentary. This is called Waco, the Waco Tragedy, the Final Report. It was done by the National Geographic Channel. It was done for a mainstream public audience. I want you to pay attention to a few things here. First of all, how do they describe the group? Do they describe it as a cult? Okay. Do they give you enough information to decide whether or not this group is really a danger? And was the documentary itself fair, or did you need more information? Okay. So can you figure out really if this is a danger, and is this really fair? Is this a form of propaganda? And again, think about the cultivation theory about if this is all you saw of the group, how would you feel about the group itself? So, and keep in mind those definitions. That essentialists will tell you, look, the main difference between a cult and a religion is religions don't deliberately hurt people. Churches don't have a policy of murdering people or molesting children or anything. Even though members of many churches have engaged. Look, ministers have killed people before and cheated on their wives. It doesn't mean that the Baptist church supports that, right? And if you look at even though the Catholic Church moved people around when they've been accused of that, many times they release these people or filed charges against them, right? It's not the policy of the Catholic Church to allow that to occur. You know? Anyway, and they will say cults, their main goal is to exploit and damage people, and they take advantage of people, and they take their money, and potentially they drive them to things like suicide or murder or whatever, like the Jonestown cult. He killed a congressman. Okay? And then 909 people drank Kool-Aid with cyanide in it and died. Okay? And they were injecting cyanide into babies' mouths and stuff. And cyanide's a nasty way to die. It like contorts your body all up. And supposedly it contorts your body so bad it can break your back. You slobber and foam with the mouth and you convulse. And it's pretty quick, but it's nasty. You know. Anyway, probably like dying of smoke inhalation to some extent. So let me show you this, and I think you'll get a good idea of the fervor and the energy and the concern that was around this group. So again, this one is called Waco, the Final Report. And you should ask yourself, is it really the final report? Thank you. It's about 40 minutes or so. Hopefully we'll have enough time. We should have, well, it'll probably take most of the class. So write down this stuff, and then we will come back on Monday and talk about it. So keep up with the reading. I think you only have to read chapter 6 for next time. But check that, double check that. And chapter 6 is entitled, Babies Were Being Beaten, which is what they told Janet Reno. And you'll see that in here too. And you got to think that they were playing on the fact that Janet Reno was a woman, weren't they? I don't think any male attorney general was going to allow that to happen. But they were certainly playing on her sensibilities, and they had absolutely no proof that babies were being beaten. All right, here we go. Oh, and by the way, you see the advert. This is live leak, and there's not commercials in here. But if anybody's interested, Shannon Doherty is back. So with a reality show. Most of you probably don't even know who that is. She owes me money for that advertisement, though. All right, here we go. So now you get a good look visually at who these people are. That's David Koresh.
It's ridiculous that military equipment can come onto so much property. It's been 12 years. It's still...
Don't pay attention to me taking notes. I already watched this. Watched this probably 30 times.
Never had time. They did. It's a mistake. And I'm responsible. You think you've heard it all, but beyond the headlines, beneath the surface, there's much more. Next on the final.
So they're trying to say here that we're giving you the straight story here. You want to know the truth? Here it is. We'll see if this is the truth.
February 28th, 1993, around 9:30 a.m. Two pickup trucks pull flatbed cattle trailers across.
Yeah, we'll about get done with most of it.
Hiding on the trailers are these agents, 76 in all, from the Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the ATF. 10 miles east of the town of Waco, the trucks turn off this road and into a common. This 77-acre compound is home to an obscure religious sect called the Branch Davidians. Question: who are the Branch Davidians? The group's home is a complex of buildings, including a chapel and living quarters for the 100-plus members.
This group has been based
An
there
ATF
since
investigation
1930.
has uncovered evidence that within these walls,
There's still a church there, too.
the Davidians have amassed an arsenal of unregistered, fully automatic firearms. These agents are here to serve a search warrant on the compound and an arrest warrant for weapons violations on the Davidian leader, David Koresh. Question: who is David Koresh? 9:47 a.m. The ATF trucks pull up and an agent jumps out. He runs toward the front door of the compound, yelling, Police, we have a warrant. David Koresh opens the door. Then, gunshots ring out.
Nobody knows who shot first. It's one of the areas
Now
of
the
the country.
firefight begins. A TV news crew tipped in advance.
On the ATF shot the
captures the
there were
Battle
dogs out
East
front.
footage.
Puppies, he shot them.
AK-47s. I heard the 50 cals, and I heard what I believed to be an M60 machine gun. I realized we were in big trouble.
Why do the Davidians have so many weapons?
You gotta ask yourself, why was there a news crew there?
The ATF agents carry only handguns and semi-automatic
Yeah, they always do that when
firearms.
they raid a crack house. You want civilians around when you do that.
Even so, they're determined to confiscate the Davidians' arsenal. They know the weapons are stored on the second
Bunch of
floor,
bullets start going
next to
through the wall.
Koresh's bedroom. Special Agent Bill Buford and his team fight their way into the arms room.
We were receiving that far through the walls. The majority of the rounds were coming from Koresh's bedroom, which was right next door to the arms room.
Bullets blast through the floorboards, too. The agents take multiple hits before they retreat. Buford is shot 4 times. 9:48 a.m. 1 minute after the gunfire begins, Branch Davidian
That's the Harvard Wall
dials
rack.
911.
Hello? Yeah, this is Lieutenant Lynch, man. Yeah, the 75-minute runoff building, the shooting at us in Mount Carmel.
McLennan County Sheriff's Deputy Lieutenant Larry Lynch is on duty.
You guys, please stop
Yeah,
talking.
tell them the children and women in here to call it off. All right, you know? I hear you. Call it off!
Lieutenant Lynch contacts the ATF to let them know he is in communication with the Davidians.